Oh boy, 3D platformers is probably one of my favorite genres in gaming, next to JRPGs. That being said, 3D platformers don't usually take 100 hours to complete and are a little bit more casual. Sadly, there's not as many of them out there as its 2D counterpart, which, all things considered, is a lot cheaper to produce, and for that very reason is very popular with indie developers these days. I can only hope more 3D platforming games are coming our way though. They seem to be coming back. Chicken Little. Why don't more people know about this game? Granted, it's not an amazing platforming game, maybe because it's focused on other gameplay styles as much as it does on platforming. Which indeed means platforming levels are only a small part of this game. But hey, they're fun and so are the other levels. I fully understand anyone who would be skeptical about a movie tie-in game being so good, but believe me when I say this game is really good. All the characters get some action and there's plenty of gameplay styles to keep the game feeling fresh at all times. Usually I'm not a huge fan of changing up the gameplay too much since it usually takes away from the quality of each individual style of gameplay. Take Spyro 3 as an example of that. This, however, is not the case in Chicken Little. Granted, the gameplay in each style isn't very deep since you have next to no time to play with it, but that's where I'm impressed. Getting into a different kind of gameplay like twice an hour or so could get annoying as you have to learn how these new controls work. But there's no learning curve with most of these, meaning you can hop right from one into the next without much of a break in the pacing of the game. The only exception is Chicken Little himself in his platforming levels. He gets some upgrades and has a wide variety of moves, which makes him obviously the main character. I mean, aside from the fact that the game is named after him. Of course the game throws in movie clips. This still is a movie tie-in game, of course, so obviously the game has to follow the story of the movie, but in an interesting way. The game doesn't just make some key scenes of the movie playable and call it a day, it adds whole new things to fill in the gaps. These are definitely some of the most fun to play as you feel the story will happen to the world at large, not just the main character, and honestly, it's nice to get a little more game for your money than just a couple of levels that have little to no creativity in them. Even the levels that are taken from the movie are well designed and fun to play. Somehow they started with a movie tie-in game but ended up accidentally making a fun game which, because of its many gameplay styles, has something to offer to almost anybody who will play it. Then again, it'll also annoy almost everyone at least once or twice since you have to get through all these different gameplay styles. And of course this is a platforming games list, so this game having a majority of other gameplay styles over actual platforming levels ends up at the number 10 spot. Jax III. Jax hasn't aged well, let's all be honest about that. I mean, the character and the whole world design of course. The dude's whole thing is based on television. It's maybe a little ironic that I'm here on YouTube talking about a gaming mascot who has aged poorly because of television slowly dying. Anyway, as far as gameplay goes, this game still holds up. And while many of the references in both Jax's comments and during gameplay and level design will be lost to time, and for the current generation of gamers are probably already largely lost, the world feels alive and interesting even without knowing what they are based on. I'll be honest, playing Jax III I can't name all of the inspirations for the levels, probably because I've never been a real television fan, and I guess growing up in Europe doesn't help either, since most of the reference would be based on American culture, which, while similar, still is very different, especially as far as media is concerned. This doesn't mean I don't enjoy the game though, as a matter of fact not knowing what everything is based on lets you have a more exploration based experience, which Jax III lends itself fairly well to, since the levels you can enter are certainly not linear. They're small open worlds in and of themselves, which you unlock by collecting TV remotes. Yeah, I told you this game was dated. And honestly, you can skip some of them. Some levels aren't very interesting and the amount of remotes required to get to the final boss is low enough to the point where you could almost skip the entirety of the last world if you completed everything before it, or you could just skip certain missions throughout the whole game. What I'm trying to say is that the end goal you need to reach is balanced pretty well. You'll probably have to go into every level to beat the game, but if you don't like a level you don't have to do it, or at least you don't have to do it more than once. It might sound like I'm saying less game time is better, which sounds like something you would say about a bad game, but that's not it at all. I'm trying to say that this game offers you a lot of variety and the freedom to use that. Choose which levels you enjoy and play more of that while playing less of the ones you don't enjoy as much. Doing this means the game should offer fun to a wider audience. I wouldn't quite call Jax obscure, but I would urge all of you to play at least Jax III. Jax 2 is pretty good too. Skip Jax 1. It's a 2D platformer I would class with games like Raymond 1 and Crash Bandicoot 1. In a theoretical sense, they're good. Just way too difficult for me to enjoy, sadly. Psychonauts. This is a little bit of a strange game. It's not on here for its platforming gameplay. As a matter of fact, I think the gameplay is just decent if you ask me. I have a sort of rule, and mostly this applies to 3D platforming over its 2D counterpart, where this is a little bit more nuanced. But if you need a double jump to make your game work, your jumping just doesn't quite work well enough generally. The double jump might allow you to reach a more height, but simply having a higher jump could do that too. Where the double jump becomes useful is when your control in midair is so slippery it becomes impossible to land properly on anything. While Psychonauts isn't a horrible offender of this, it goes to show it's far from perfect in a gameplay sense. Then again, as a collectathon, it's a lot of fun. Picking up as many figments and baggage as you can to get new Psychonaut ranks and unlock new abilities and upgrade the abilities you already have is a lot of fun. A lot of games just give you the satisfaction of, congratulations, you got all of the things, here look at some numbers, it's fun isn't it? The Psychonauts reward you for going out of your way to collect these items, and even goes as far as requiring you to get certain ranks to progress with the game. That might sound like it would set up for a lot of grinding, but it doesn't. Aside from the fact that you'll probably go after these figments anyway, because, let's be frank, we're all a bunch of simple-minded animals and we like bright colours, it's not like the requirements the game asks you to get are all that high, just enough so you need to go back to the Psychonauts base to get your abilities and upgrades. A great way to make sure people actually know this is a thing, if you ask me. Add on top of that the fact that the writing in this game is very well done. The characters don't feel like overly dramatic or cliché puppets delivering lines. It's like they're really people. And I'll tell you, writing realistic feeling characters is a difficult thing, so I am very impressed by that. But sadly these things have little to do with the platforming part of the game, which is why it's so low on this list. As a game in general, it's very good. As a 3D platforming game, it's decent, I guess. Let's just all wait for Psychonauts 2. It'll come, I'm sure of it. Someday. Toy Story 2. It's a movie tie-in game, so you would expect it to be a cheap marketing tool to sell to children who don't know what a good game is. But it's actually way better than it has any right to be. Starting with the controls, Buzz's moveset is pretty diverse, having a laser which is your main way of attacking, but some enemies won't be affected by a laser, so you'll have to use your spin attack using your wings. Those same wings can be used also to make a double jump, making platforming a little bit easier to get right. Add to that the fact that you can do a stomp move to either damage an enemy directly below you, or stop all your horizontal movement to get down to a platformer when facing some particularly difficult platforming challenges, and the game feels fun to play. What makes this game different from other 3D platformers and collectathons though? Well, you're a toy. It might sound like a stupid reason to give, but hear me out. While jumping around a city or a forest might be fun, to a toy everyday objects will pose as a big challenge. Getting through a kitchen as Buzz Lightyear is an adventure, while if I were to walk through the kitchen, it would take me, I don't know, 1 second? Altogether this gives the opportunity for some great level design, and the game delivers on it. It's by no means perfect though. In the airport level you have to get to a number of stations by climbing on top of an airplane, waiting for one of the wings to connect and then jump onto the station. Then when you're done at that station you either have to wait for the plane to return or just jump off and climb all your way back up, which is a pain to do since the levels are so damn large. That's another thing, this is a PlayStation 1 game, but the levels are so damn big. And with the exception of the level I just talked about, they're very filled too. Making a big space is easy, but filling it with interesting things to do is a lot more difficult. One way the game does this is by making levels not big in a horizontal sense, but mostly in a vertical sense. The levels are very tall. Which fits perfectly with the game being a platform of course, since you have to jump your way to the top. Long story short, something went horribly wrong with this game, and it was actually developed by talented people on a decent budget without being released too early. I mean, I'm not sure the guys got a memo, but you're not supposed to do that with a movie tie-in game. A Hat in Time. This game was half of the reason I started making this list. Up until writing the script I had not played A Hat in Time, so frankly I just needed an excuse to buy it since I heard nothing but positive things about it. And when I played it, I say I must agree, A Hat in Time feels like a GameCube game. Anyone who's played it will understand what I mean. Hell, even the music reminds me of 2005. I don't know why it does, it just makes me happy. I'm nostalgic for a game I've never even played before. What even is this? For anyone who's not played it, I'll try to explain. Not only does the game feel somewhat similar to Mario Sunshine, which obviously was an inspiration for this along with many other iconic 3D platforming games, the way the controls work down to the acceleration of your character just feels like a game from back in the day. You know how pixel art styles often mimic 8-bit or 16-bit looks, but don't quite get it right, so it just looks off and you can tell how modern it is? There's a huge risk in trying to mimic the controls and feeling of a console that's over a decade old at this point and had a very unique controller, and somehow this game gets it surprisingly right. The controls do feel a little slippery sometimes, but just as many games on this list, you have a double jump to correct that. You also have a dive move to get some extra distance on your jump, a wall jump that doesn't quite work the way you think it does. It allows you to run up a wall and then jump. This can be combined with the double jump to make for some fun combos where you run up a wall, jump off and then double jump to make it back onto the wall. You see how movesets can be more than just a couple of moves. These moves integrate with each other to string together into platforming combos, and that, above all else, is what 3D platformers are all about. A double jump just by itself feels like a cheap tool to me. But included in a system like this, it just enhances everything about the jumping mechanics in the game and allows you so much more freedom in your movements. And of course I couldn't forget about the hat system, the very thing the game is named after. You can craft hats, all with their own powers. Your default one will act as a guide to show you where the next goal is in this level, but you can also have hats which make you run faster. I love this hat so much. Ones that allow you to throw bombs as well. There's a good amount of them to play around with and give the platforming puzzles more depth than just jump from one place to the next, which is still a thing. I mean, anyone who's ever played Mario Sunshine or I suppose Mario Galaxy would recognize these levels, right? Altogether, this game is a lot of fun, and if you've not yet played it, go get it. Crash Bandicoot 2. Get ready to hear this a lot, but damn, this was a difficult decision to make. Crash Bandicoot 2 and 3 would have both made it onto this list. But this list wouldn't be as interesting if I just put a couple of franchises on here. I prefer Crash Bandicoot 2 personally, but that's mostly because of atmosphere. It's a lot darker than the third game. And even though the big plot twist of Cortex being evil after all, I mean, yeah, the game is called Cortex Strikes Back, who would have thought, is not surprising at all. It's a Crash Bandicoot game, let's not focus too much on the story. But then I reminded myself I shouldn't take atmosphere into account as much for this list, so I started to compare the games on a gameplay level. Crash Bandicoot 3 has more power-ups, after every world you get one, and it has time relics. And even some extra levels for doing these time trials. So surely Crash Bandicoot 3 would have been a better fit for this spot. But then I played the racing levels, the airplane levels, the underwater levels, the jet ski levels and the poorer levels again, which reminded me that only about half of this game is actually platforming levels. Don't get me wrong, I like most of these levels, except for Orange Asphalt, that level can go fuck itself. And I'm aware Crash Bandicoot 2 isn't just platforming levels, we got the polar levels too, which I might add have more of a platforming focus than the poorer levels still. And there's the jetpack levels, which, well, fair point, are a little random and stupid. But there's just simply a lot more platforming in the second game, and the game mechanics are mostly the same. Not exactly identical, but unless you speedrun one game or the other, it'll be hard to tell the difference on a normal playthrough. So both games have something that the other doesn't, and while I do prefer Crash 2, and while it is on this list, I would say neither is better than the other. They are enjoyable for very different reasons, and the simple fact is, Crash Bandicoot 2 has more platforming, and this is a platforming games list, so there you go. At the end of the day, there's one thing we can be sure about though, Crash Bandicoot 1 never had any chance of making anywhere close to being on this list. Spyro 2. As I said before, a hard choice to pick. This time it was between the first and the second game. I don't really like the third Spyro game all that much. The first game is more so based on platforming, where the second game started to integrate a bunch of mini-games which often did not take advantage of Spyro's moveset. As a matter of fact, often they would introduce an entirely new control scheme. Then, if Crash Bandicoot 3 was banished from this list for having too many gameplay styles, which are in platforming, why does Spyro 2 still make it onto this list? It's injustice, I hear you say. Well, mostly because in Spyro you can skip most of these mini-games. Of course you need a number of orbs to progress with the game, and you can't just all find them laying around in the hub worlds, but in Crash you need to finish every level before making it out of the world, making this an annoying thing. Non-platforming based levels are all mandatory, whereas in Spyro, if you don't like a minigame you can choose not to play it. And then we get to the point of, yeah, Spyro 1 played nice, really fun to play and always feels smooth, but it's nothing compared to the improved engine Spyro 2 and, while I don't like to admit it, Spyro 3 run on. The addition of orbs in the levels and talisman gives a little bit more structure to the game without losing the open world feeling. The power-ups you get in Spyro 2 change up the gameplay a good amount too. Of course there's flight and the Super Flame returns, but now as a Super Flame with an explosion. Which, of course, exploding things are always better. Supercharge also makes a combat and now uses a gate like all the other power-ups instead of the ramps that sometimes didn't really work. But there's also power-ups which make you able to walk on lava, a spring jump which isn't as much as a power-up as it is a tool in the level, and last but certainly not least, Ice Breath. I love the Ice Breath. It's not meant for offensive purposes, but instead of killing enemies they turn into blocks which you can create your own jumping puzzles with and get to the places you need to be. And for some reason this is just too awesome, but in Metropolis, one of the last levels in the game, you get a combined Super Flight and Super Flame power-up, which, well, no rational reactions here, it's just awesome. Raymond III. Do I even need to say it? By now you can probably tell what's going on. I prefer Raymond 2 this time though, at least I think I do. If Crash 2 and 3 are enjoyable for very different reasons, Raymond 2 and 3 might as well belong to whole different series each. Rayman has never been a series to stay put when it was always innovating. That's if you don't count Rayman Origins and Legends, which are pretty much the same game, and oh yeah, and the rabbits, also ignore those. Rayman 1 was a hardcore 2D platforming game. Then Rayman 2 is mostly atmosphere-based 3D platforming, which is dark and mysterious and honestly downright disturbing at times. Then Raymond 3 is a lot more bright in its general feeling, but more gameplay focused. It also tells more of a story. Not exactly a narrative driven game, but definitely a step up from Raymond 2. And seeing as how I've been basing this whole list on gameplay over other things like writing and atmosphere, it was little to no other choice than picking Raymond 3. Another trend you must have noticed by now is me talking about power-ups. It's a thing most platformers do to keep the gameplay from getting stale, and Raymond 3 is no exception. It has a good amount of them. The thing with power-ups is that they tend to be either forgettable or just kind of blend together. In Raymond 3, all power-ups do something distinctly different. The green tornado power-ups help you to lower certain platforms but also shrinks enemies. The blue chain power-up lets you grapple on flying rings but also electrocutes enemies. Then the orange rocket is as simple as that, a rocket. It kills enemies, but you can also hit switches with it. Honestly, this one is the least interesting out of all of them. Almost. There's also the yellow one, which just allows you to use your hover ability to gain some height for a couple of seconds. But even these more boring ones stand out and are interesting. I don't know if it really counts as platforming, but the disco surfing segments between worlds are a lot of fun. It's like you're playing through an acid trip, and it has no place being here at all. Still, I'm glad they put it in, because hell, it's a lot of fun to master these segments, just like with the rest of the game. Sonic Generations. Well, let me assure you, this one wasn't difficult to pick at all. Out of all the 3D Sonic games, this is by far the best. And yes, I know, this is not just a 3D Sonic game, but for this list let's just conveniently ignore all the classic Sonic levels. After I mention how genius it is to combine these two styles from a marketing perspective, and somehow, by some sort of dark magic, both gameplay styles work and are fun to play. Of course I prefer the 3D levels since I prefer the whole genre. And even though I know most 3D games aren't particularly good, I do enjoy most of them. So revisiting a lot of levels and playing through all the levels reimagined as 3D is a blast. Green Hill Zone 3D might be one of my favorite levels in any Sonic game ever, and the redone City Escape is much better than the original. Not to mention Crisis City, this one is actually playable now. The bosses are of course also reimagined versions of old fights, like Chaos being now much more epic and having more than 2 polygons and a proper texture. The modern rendering power makes these encounters feel much more cinematic, which really helps to sell the feeling of action. The game itself, considering both styles, is rather short. But this is a matter of quality over quantity if I've ever seen one. I still don't quite understand how Sonic Team messed up this much before and also after making this game, but somehow got it so right with this game. Super Mario Galaxy. Okay, so right now you're either very surprised or not surprised at all. When I first made the entries for this list, I assumed I would play Mario Odyssey on here, and I'm fairly sure a lot of you were expecting that too. Then I played Mario Odyssey and my suspicion was confirmed. It's an awesome game and I just had to be on this list. But just before writing this list, I replayed Mario Galaxy again and I realized I like this game way more. The movement is just so much more fluid, the spin allows you to chain together jumpman combos much more efficiently than Cappy ever does. That being said, Cappy is better if you're trying to break the game, I suppose, but my vote goes to the Luma jump for sure. As far as levels go, they're very different. Mario Odyssey just drops you in a world and expects you to find power moons on your own, where Mario Galaxy sets you down in a single level within a world. These levels may have some overlapping parts, but are mostly just connected through a common theme. Much more linear for sure, but when I say linear, you assume it's a bad thing, but it's not. Well done linearity can be very good. The game has much more control over how you experience it, since you won't just walk off in a random direction. So yeah, finding secrets isn't as much finding them as it is the game allowing you to see them at the proper moment, but I want to ask you, does that really matter? As long as you get the satisfaction of discovering the secrets, beating the level and collecting the coins, that's the important part, and Mario Galaxy makes sure you get that in the right doses. The idea of having little planets all with their own gravity is a neat concept. Maybe even a little gimmicky, but it gives the game identity. Mario Odyssey is that Mario game with the living hat, whereas Mario Galaxy is that Mario game in space. I'll leave it up to you which sounds better in retrospect. Then there's Mario Galaxy 2, I'll be honest, I've not played much of this, but really, it's mostly more of the same. Loads more levels, some new power-ups, a couple of new mechanics which have been tweaked to either be less annoying or to make sure it's different enough to sell as a game instead of a DLC. I suppose it's a little too much for a DLC, and at this point Nintendo had never made DLC yet. Thanks for watching this top 10 3D platformers games list. If you've enjoyed this video, leave a like below this video and subscribe to stay up to date with all my new uploads. And while you're down there, let me know what your favorite 3D platformers with a comment below this video. Until the next time, bye.